So, the Kids Online Safety Act is something that you should be aware of as a software development engineer. It just passed the House, and they haven't even updated this website yet for the Congress bill because it just happened. Uh, but it's important for you to understand this because if you're building online services, you need to be aware of this and be following it when you write code. Uh, One of the big problems with this particular bill is it's very far reaching, and there's a lot of people at such as the Electronic Frontier Foundation which are saying it's unconstitutional because it actively limits what people are allowed to learn and view online even when they're not a minor. Now, we can talk about protecting kids all day, and I'll agree with you generally. But the moment you tell an adult what they're allowed to do or allowed to learn or whatever, that's where you've crossed the line. The Constitution makes it very clear that we have the right to read, to print, to be vocal, to do whatever. And as Americans, one of our fundamental rights is our ability to tell people who are empowered to go F themselves. And so that's kind of important. And so if you don't have an online platform to be able to do that, then you're going to get censored and you're just going to end up living in a very much less free state. And so the big issue here is that there's going to be some problems with this bill. And if you are, there's no summary of the bill because the summary's in progress. They haven't literally they just passed it. So let's go through and talk about this. So, this bill comes from a bunch of lobbyists with a political agenda who are, in my mind, abusing the parents of kids who were bullied online into deleting themselves. We need to be very clear about where this comes from. It is not something that was built out of goodwill or good faith to protect kids. It was something that is a political weapon being used during an election year by manipulation of parents' grief. And that's bad. It is unfortunate, but that's also something that's very common in American politics. And because it's an election year, you have to be careful. So, the fun thing about this is that they go in about making it a lot of things here. We've got the Kids Online Safety Act, we've got the filter bubble transparency, which is really huge for us as an industry of software development engineers. And there's a thing about relations with state laws, which isn't really that big of a deal because it preempts state laws. This is going to be federal law, which means that it doesn't matter which state you're in. This will happen. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer, but I'm going to go through quickly a lot of these things and kind of highlight some of the bigger issues. One of them being that they're going to define child as somebody who's under the age of 13. But if you scroll down a bit, they define minor as somebody who's under 17. And so you can be 17 and be considered an adult under this. And that's because there are particular states that basically mandate, such as Texas and Colorado, that say if you're 17, you're an adult and you can consent to adult things. And so as a result of that, there is some leeway in this because of the weirdness of American laws. Now, personally, I think you're an adult when you're 18, and you're actually an adult when you're 21. But I also fully understand that from a medical perspective, as somebody who was going to be an MD at one time, because when I studied neuroscience, I learned a lot about this. The neocortex and your brain chemistry tends to mature around 25, 25, 28 or so, depending on, if you're a late bloomer or not. And so you're technically not really an adult until like 29, but I'm not going to go into that. The important thing here, though, is that they're going to talk about definitions here and under the idea of protecting kids. And we, as software development engineers, are need to be aware that this carves out some exceptions for things like national infrastructure, phone companies, ISPs, service providers, people that are not working to try to make a profit. Libraries have special protections. If you're not a general online platform, it's okay. Zoom, for example, doesn't have to worry about this. There are different exceptions here, and you're free to go look at that if you really want to. But one of the things that I want you to understand is that design features are being legally restricted. Okay? Design feature. Okay? So if somebody is under 17, you're not allowed to give them infinite scroll or autoplay. Okay? You're not allowed to give them rewards for time spent on the platform. You're not allowed to give them notifications or push alerts to get them to use the platform more. You're not allowed to give them badges or achievements. You're not allowed to use recommendation systems that are personalized. You're not even allowed to do in-game purchases. Like, these are any feature or component of a covered platform that will encourage or increase the frequency, time spent, activity of minors or a covered platform. And so, as a result of that, these are things that you have to consider. You have to be able to turn individual features off. So, when you do system design and your overall architecture, remember you're going to need feature flags that are per user, not per system, not per deployment, per user. This greatly complicates the design and cost of systems, but ultimately, that's what this law requires. Now, they talk about high impact of things, and they're basically saying, look, if you're a tech company you actually know about because you make, enough money or you have enough users, we're going to go after you extra specially hard. And that's basically the politics here. I mentioned politics earlier. Because it is an election year, there's a lot of back and forth with big tech and everything else. Big tech is taking a beating. That's why we got all these layoffs. But it's also about the fact that from a power perspective, one of the things you have to understand is that culture is a territory. And so having a lot of users allows them to gain power, even if they don't have the real estate to do that. And so they effectively become a network actor with sovereign power. And so this is the sovereign state regulating the power of those network actors explicitly by saying, look, if you get too big, if you have too many users, if your population grows too large, we will target you first. And that's what's happening. And so the the idea here too is they're also talking about if the platform knows that the person is underage. This is going to be very interesting because, as we all know, kids lie. And you're going to have people setting up their profiles and then lying about their age. And then companies are going to come in and say, oh, what? They lied about their age. Let's close their account down. And honestly, from an account trust and safety perspective, that's pretty standard because at that point, we don't know who they are. They're a threat actor. We can't validate their identity. We've decided to just mitigate the risk of the company. And that happens a lot. And that's normal and that's standard. And so, what this will do is it will lead to increased identity validation, which in turn, when breaches happen, will create more problems. And so, I see this, if passed, as creating effectively a blended need for a know your customer process that includes full identity verification. Not, hey, is this really you at this email address verification, but are you really doing verification? And I think any platform that already has some kind of verification status that is not based on the billing method like Twitter does would be upfront here. But unfortunately, not a single platform already does this. And so, well, actually, there are. PayPal, for example, because they're a billing provider, has to do some of those things. But those kind of checks would need to be required to use social media from now on. You'd have to validate for Facebook, for example. And that's a real threat from this is that you would actively have to go out of your way to validate your identity and actively validate who you say you are at the address you say you are with the social security number that you say you have. And that's scary to me. And so they're talking. So one thing. So this next thing here is that they have defined the term mental health disorder, and they've referenced the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Health Disorders, fifth edition. That's known as the DSM in psychology circles. And I find that interesting because when I was in college and learning tech, my major was computer science and computer engineering, but I had a minor in psychology, is what I was going for. And I did that ultimately because I didn't have the money to do the full MD that I wanted to do because I wanted to get into cybernetics. Long story short, the Statistics and Manual of Mental Health Disorders, fifth edition, is not perfect. And it also defines a lot of things flat out badly, especially if you are a part of minority communities. And so, as a result of that, what they've effectively done is they've made a guidebook that, has some medical criteria in it, but isn't considered medically rigorous or scientifically rigorous as some people would like it to be, the legal standard. And so, if you're not familiar with mental health and you're a software development engineer, start learning about it because you might get pulled into a design sprint and be told, "Oh, we need to write code to show signs of, narcissistic personality disorder so we can close that person's account down." It might happen. We don't know. And so this is something to think about. Okay? They are legally mandating the DSM. And keep in mind, they're explicitly saying the fifth edition. They're not saying the fifth edition or greater. So if an upgrade happens, it would automatically be used. They're explicitly saying that in this law, for however many decades this law exists, they will only ever use that version. Not the current edition, not the version that gets updated with errata or fixes or whatever, just the old version. The old version that might have, how can I translate this? It might have a bug in it, or it might have a CVE. You're required to use that version. And that scares me. Now, microtransactions are also on the chopping block. And I kind of agree. I don't like microtransactions. And I feel like if you pay for the service, you should just get it and it should be yours. You should, make one payment and you're done. But then again, I grew up before Google, so might be biased on that. And they're talking about purchases made in virtual currency. So they're also adding virtual currency. So if you go into a video game and you buy points to then spend in the video game, that's covered. They've totally closed that loophole. And so what you'll find is a lot of what I'm just going to call same day games studios are going to shut down, which is great, but that's also going to make how can I say this? I feel like it will be good for kids, but it will be bad for the world because now those people are going to be out finding bigger scams. So we're going to have to look out for that, sadly. Okay. Inclusions, surprise purchases involving surprise mechanics, new characters, or in-game items. They're talking about they don't include overall expansion of the game. They're not including things that you earn from gameplay that are not otherwise purchasable or redeemable. So if you grind really hard and get the mount that you want that you can't actually buy in the game, that's fine. But if you can buy that item in the game, then that's a problem. And once again, we've got the distinction between a minor and a kid. In this case, the term minor means an individual who's under the age of 17, which means if you're 17, you are not a minor under this. And as I said before, that's because of states like Colorado and Texas, which consider somebody who is 17 to be an adult for all intents and purposes. And so, effectively, what this does is it updates. I think what will happen is a lot of dev teams will start using the standards from the UK. because the UK requires somebody be 16 or older to be able to even use platforms. And so in America, we had the Child Online Protection Act, which is the earlier version of this, which signified 13 as the minimum age. And this does is it updates that, but it also kind of adds extra age limits. And so in general, if somebody is under 17, they probably shouldn't be using your platform under these laws. But at the same time, this is going to put sites like Nickelodeon and like all the kids stuff. Oh gosh, I just realized Apple's kids game stuff. They're getting regulated out of existence probably by this, and so uh, that's going to be very interesting. We talked about the different shots and video games and what a parent is and defining personal data and has the same meaning as the term personal information as defined in section 1302 of the Child's Online, okay, so COPA, which is the Child's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is the earlier version. They're basically saying we're going to use that definition. So all that old stuff still applies. It's just gotten more harsh for companies and there's more rules now. So the funny thing about this is it talks about the personalized recommendation system. In general, the term personalized recommendation system means a fully or partially automated system used to suggest, promote, rank, recommend content, including users, hashtags, or posts based on the personal data of users. Exclusions. The term personalized recommendation system does not include systems that suggest, promote, or rank content based solely on the user's language, city, or town, or age. Technical means do not fully automate or replace human decision-making processes. Technical means that are designed to block, detect, identify, or prevent users from accessing inappropriate, unlawful, or harmful content. Or technical means designed to prevent or detect fraud, malicious conduct, or other illegal activity, or preserve the integrity and security of the site, basically. So basically what they're saying here is that personalized recommendation systems based on other data, besides your age, besides your language, besides your city or town. Basically, if it's not your location, the language you speak, or how old you are, they're considering that personalized if they're using that data. There's a lot of bad stuff here, but basically, I'm going to scroll through this here. Obviously, bad stuff is bad, and we're all going to agree to that. And but they also said that you've got a prevention of harm and exercise reasonable care, which is kind of safeguards and limitations. That's good. But the idea here is they're changing things so that now there's something called a duty of care. The idea being that these tech companies have a requirement to act as a fiduciary. Fiduciary, of course, meaning that they act in your best interest. They're on your side. They got your back. Simplest way of putting that is they're your bro and they're not going to hurt you. The fun thing about this though is that if this person who's supposed to act as a duty of care and act as a fiduciary is, because of that, is given two options, they have to pick the best one for you. And they are required to pick the one that they feel is best for you. Now, you might disagree with them. They might think, well, a short term thing now is bad for you, but long term, this is better for you. And so, as a result of that, they might make that choice, and you might get stung in the first point. But that's kind of an ambiguous thing. It's not well defined. I don't think that. I think there's quite a bit here to kind of reconsider. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, for example, has talked about this, and actually, they had some really good stuff about how this is basically unconstitutional because they didn't define things well enough, and they were actually talking effectively treating it as censorship, where you're not allowed to learn things, you're not allowed to see things because it's not allowed on the platform because of this, because it might be seen by somebody who shouldn't see it anyway, and at that point, Bob's your uncle, and I don't know. I think the reporting mechanism So they also are requiring that there is reporting mechanisms that actually work. One of the things that happen with a lot of websites these days is we build automated systems using neural networks to figure out, okay, well, is there really an issue? Because you get people that are on there on fake accounts sitting there reporting everything they see just for the fun of it. And you literally get bots that sit there and report everything they see just because they're trying to get everything they disagree with removed. You also see companies literally going after people's posts because they don't like the fact that their product was mentioned in a negative way and they're worried about the market optics. So they will try to get you deleted simply because you said that their product didn't work as well as their marketing said it did. And so there's all sorts of fun stuff here about this because reporting mechanisms, um, an electronic point of contact specific to matters involving harms, they're basically saying, look, there needs to be a dedicated person and there needs to be a dedicated team that will take those reports. Now, the automation will now go to that and say, ooh, let's spam the crap out of them. And that's going to be a new cost center for these companies. And they're also going to have to hire for that. But guess what? They're not going to want to pay. So that will probably be shipped off into, like, Canada, Mexico, Philippines, whatever. And you're going to have people in other countries with very lax laws in some cases, uh, dealing with kids more than the people that can be held accountable. And I don't believe that's good either. Um, and they're I like the fact that they're actually trying to make things reasonable and timely. But they're also saying, look, if you report something within 10 days, uh, if you're big enough, if you've got 10 million active users on a monthly basis, you get 10 days. If you've got less than that, you get 21 days. And in general, within 21 days, you better be able to respond to them in a way that isn't maybe automated. They may have to look into this more. But basically, the duty of care is such that you're going to have to spend the money to deal with this, whether you like it or not, because that will be the law. Okay. And they want you to act quickly, which is reasonable. Like, if there's a real harm, then yeah, I mean, I would want to get to it as fast as possible. The problem here is the idea that you're expecting people to work through a queue fast enough, which means if you have, let's say you have, let's say you have 140 million users, right? And you want to deal with 10%, like 10% of those make requests of this kind, which would be a lot, honestly. But let's just say it's 1%. Okay, so 1.4 million requests a month because it's like 1% of your user base, right? At that point, you now have to go in and say, okay, well, we're over the 10 million active users, so we only have 10 days. So we have to figure out 1 point. Mm, yeah, I mean, we're going to have to deal with the fact that this is going to be uh, 1.4 million requests, and we're going to have 10 days to handle them all. So, Alexa, what's 1.4 million divided by 10 divided by 8? 1.4 million divided by 10 divided by 8 is 17,500. Okay, so you need to be able to cover 17,500 requests per hour, which means you're going to have to staff a very large support team. Alexa, what's 50,000 times 17.5 thousand? 50,000 times 17.5 is 875,000. 875,000. So I said 50,000 because that's like about, that's a wage for somebody who's working in support, right? And so basically what it comes down to is that's not thousand, that's million. You're basically going to have to throw $20 million at the problem. And you're going to have to figure out your payroll, you're going to figure out everything else, your taxes, everything on top of that. And so doing the quick math, which I know is wrong, the fact is it's still expensive. This law increases a lot more costs. Now, I do believe that there should be a lot of these. I think that's good, but it also means that if you're a startup, it is that much harder for you to get off the ground because if you suddenly get a rush of an influx of users, that could kill your company. And so that's something to think about. If you're in the startup space, be worried about this and make sure you do your planning to make sure that you can protect kids and that you have the ability to respond within 10 days because you don't know when you're going to suddenly get those 10 million active users. You should have the plan in place because what happens is if you were under that, say you're at 9.9999 all the way down, nine's all the way down, and you're at 21 days, you think you're good, and suddenly that 10 millionth user joins. Suddenly you're legally required to only spend 10 days. So your time's been cut in half, which means you should have had the capacity all along to do this in 10 days. That is the new standard for everything, for every customer service interaction, because every customer service interaction might be one of these cases. Think about that. Obviously, advertising legal stuff is bad. We shouldn't do that. And but I find interesting is that they are explicitly prohibiting dark patterns. So there are books on dark patterns. I don't think I even have one. Probably don't even have one. Thought I had one from a friend that I was looking at, try to figure out how evil they were, but I think I gave it back because it was worthless. And but it's interesting because those web pages that make it hard for you to cancel, those web pages that allow you to, subscribe with the click of a button, but don't allow you to cancel until you contact support and wait for them to get back to you within 25 hours. That's banned now because a kid might be trying to cancel and these dark patterns are prohibited. So what this does is it also means that you, as a software development engineer, are required to have full cancellation functionality on the website with a click. Better add it to your sprint, buddy, because if you don't do that, you're hurting kids. And they're saying, look, we're not gonna interrupt your gameplay. If you've got a 40-man raid going on, we're not gonna make you stop that because of this. That's fine. And they're basically saying, look, the covered platforms are allowed to block spam. They're allowed to do their normal stuff. They're allowed to, you know, they're going to do things to protect themselves and keep the system running. Um, but they're going to require the disclosure of a minor's. They're not going to require like your browsing history, your search history, etc. Okay. Um, and then so they're also carving the exceptions for location and language and age, which is interesting because they're explicitly making it about age. But then they're saying, look, they're not going to, nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent a covered platform from using a personalized recommendation system display content. A minor system only uses information on language, city, and age, which means what they're basically saying is anything outside of that you're not allowed to do. Oh, you watch this show on our platform? You might like this other thing. Oh, wait, sorry, we can't do that. What, you bought this bag of candy on our platform? Oh, you might like this other thing. No, sorry, can't do that. Not allowed anymore. Uh, and so let's see. Let's see. So I'm just skimming through here, and this is getting parental consent is fine. Prior to registration or purchase of a covered platform by an individual the platform knows as a minor, the platform should provide clear, consistent, and easy to understand notice the policies and respect of safeguards, information on access to safeguards, And notice on the cover, makes available to minors, blah, blah, blah. Basically, it says, look, we're going to tell you if we don't serve people under this specific age. And that's fine. In fact, I think all services should be like, yep, as part of our registration, what's your age? That's it. And at that point, they can be like, nope, sorry, you're too young. Uh, let's see. The covered platform that operates a personalized recommendation system shall set out in its terms and conditions in a clear, conspicuous, easy to understand manner. An overview of how personalized recommendation system is used by the covered platform to provide information to minors and information about options for minors for their parents to get opt out of control. So basically, what that means is if it's available for one user, everybody's going to want it, right? They're going to see that their kids have the option of opting out, and they're going to get angry if they, as an adult, can't do the same. So what this does is it creates a system where now anytime you have a personalized recommendation system and you have the ability to say, look, I want to opt out of this thing or this being used, you have to provide that to all users. Granted, you might have the legal ability to tell adult users no because they're not minors, but that just provides a worse customer experience. Why would you do that? And honestly, why would you write the extra code if you don't have to? Yes, it's a branch condition. If check age, do blah. But why not just say, oh, you're a customer, do blah? That's so much simpler. And so I see this as more greater transparency, which this leads up to. Alexa, shut up. And transparency. Subject to subsection B, no less frequent once a year. A covered platform shall issue a public report describing the reasonably foreseeable risk of harms and assessing the prevention and migration measures taken to address such risks. So they're going to have to basically say publicly, here's what we did, here's what we found, here's how we're going to mitigate that. And they're required to do that every year. And it will cover any platform with over 10 million active users a month. Which basically means any service because everyone wants to grow, right? And so those systems will have to be built for every company that wants to be online. So this is creating a lot of extra infrastructure, a lot of extra cost that is going to be legally mandated. Now, let's face it, a lot of this stuff not bad. We should probably do this stuff anyway. We should probably be checking, seeing if our stuff is effective. We should be checking to make sure that we can improve and protect people in a better way. That's not a bad thing. But to make it legally required means that now you have additional costs to worry about. And so it's going to be more expensive, which means online services are going to be more expensive or in some cases not even available because right now a lot of them are free and the additional costs that are created for this will in turn create more liability for the venture capitalists and the people trying to bootstrap the business, which in turn means that some startups just won't get off the ground because of the additional costs that are imposed on them. And that's just going to be a thing. It used to be you could play fast and loose and be like, hey, fine, just have customer service handle it. That's part of their duties. But this will mean that you'll have to have special customer service. It's an additional cost, an additional arm of the company that needs to be created. And so that'll be interesting. Um, and they're going to go through and, make sure everything's total accounting is done, make sure everything's fine, make sure things are public concerns. If people are dealt with, they're going to mitigate those issues. And let's see, the public report required of a cover platform under this section shall include for English and the top 5 non-English languages used by users accessing the platform, which is another thing. They're explicitly requesting that you track which user languages are used. So if they're using Espanol, me habla poquito Espanol, but I'm not very good with it. And so the end result is that you're probably going to get Spanish in there and then you're going to find what else your users use. If you find that you have a lot of Portuguese speakers from Brazil, or maybe you're big in Japan and you're going to get a lot of Japanese speakers. Um, and so, because non-English is defined, um, you can't be like, oh no, it's Australian, mate. Uh, no, it's just English as far as they're concerned. So you can't actually. It's just a dialect of English, and so this is going to be interesting because we're going to see public reports from large companies, and we're going to get an actual interesting look behind the curtain on where they're the biggest, and that is going to be interesting for countries that have historically tried to hide their influence, which I think will be very, very interesting because you can tell a lot by the language used. I think a lot of this is preventing harm is good. Reasonable inspection. So, what they're basically trying to say is that as part of all this, you have to hire a third party to audit your systems. QA is now required, and not just QA. You're going to have to deal with mental health and public health and nonprofits and conduct research and take account of the research and consider indicia or inferences of age of users in addition to any self-declared information about the age of users. This requires that you don't trust the user's age that they tell you they are. If I tell you, look, I'm a 42-year-old man, leave me alone, you're going to have to be like, well, are you really? Maybe you're a 41.6-year-old man, and that's kind of dumb, but it also kind of calls out the fact that that 42-year-old man might be a 13-year-old who is just stupid and decided to lie on their account. So now when it gets audited, they're going to lose everything they bought. They're going to lose their friend connections. They're going to lose everything because they're going to be found to be a threat actor because they lied about their age. And so that's going to be interesting because what that does is it takes the trust and safety teams, and when they do more validation, they're going to have to be heavier handed with accounts when they do validation. And I know that because I worked on the trust and safety team for a large company. I mean, it was two companies at the time. It was eBay and PayPal at the same time when I worked there. But it was interesting. And all the same, that and multi-account linking will be very interesting because you're going to get people that are running their own botnets that are going to be told, hey, we are required to consider your age here. And you know what? Your account says you're 50, but your chat logs say things like Riz and talking about Sigmas and stuff. And so either you're a bad guy or you're lying about your age. Which is it? And that will be interesting because an older person who tries to speak younger and not be chuggy is going to be called out by their use of language, and there'll be greater audits on that. I think in some ways that's good. It's going to protect kids, but it's also going to stifle speech. It's going to make people scared to use the new slang, and it's going to require that people end up using more formalized language just so they don't end up getting in trouble for simply trying to be modern with their speech patterns, which I'm curious about, to be honest. I like slang. I like to learn it. I don't have that Ohio Riz, but I mean, my Riz is Ohio. I don't know, but the fact is, like from my perspective, I and they're doing safeguards across English and non-English too. So if you have a lot of users that speak Japanese and you have nobody in your support that can speak Japanese, you're screwed. Because legally speaking, you're required to be able to do that, which means that if you're a tech company and you've got people that are not speaking English, you need to be able to afford that. You need to have that knowledge in house, which means if you suddenly get really popular in a country you didn't expect, that's going to change your whole marketing strategy. It's going to change your hiring. It's going to change your company. And so this is something that's kind of interesting. They're basically calling out the fact that they tech companies are large network actors with a global presence. And they're saying, look, the language matters and the language of your users matter. And we are not going to be able to say, hey, if you didn't know because you don't speak that language isn't going to be an excuse. And so consider that. Look at your user metrics. If they don't speak English, then better start learning that language quickly. And cooperation with independent third-party audits are going to be required. They want third parties to come in and be able to say you're good. And if they can't do that, then well, there's a problem. And so that sort of work will pick up. But unfortunately, people in that work will also have political motivations as well because it will get abused. You're going to have people that go around like Sweet Baby Inc., and they're going to abuse this to effectively try to push their own agenda politically under the guise of helping kids, when in reality, it may not even be related to helping kids. And that's going to be a problem for some companies because you're going to get people that are actively against inclusion and against making sure that people feel safe. And so you're going to have to audit the auditors. I think the thing that you should understand here is that we should be watching the watchers. Who watches the watchers? And that's something that we have to figure out if that's the case. Now, privacy safeguards are always good. Generally, keep the information by users, all users, but no matter what their age is, keep it private. Don't let it be posted on the internet. Don't let it be leaked in a giant data breach. Keep it close to your chest. That's important. And if you're not storing that data at rest in an encrypted manner, you're doing it wrong. Always encrypt your data at rest. And no, I'm not talking about encrypting the database. Talk to your DBA, obviously, but if look into the technology that's available. Okay, it's like people who are stupid and leave their passwords plain text in a database. That's stupid. You don't do that. You should be using Blowfish or something. And just data encryption at rest. Just just look into it. So they're also trying to commission studies of. They're basically making the companies do their own research studies, and they want those studies and that data fed to the Federal Trade Commission. And effectively, what they're doing is they're telling these tech companies that they're required to do work for the FTC for free now, and that's kind of sus. But it makes sense given how far overreaching this is. The problem is that that's additional cost for companies. So they're not getting paid for. And so what it really does is it dissuades any company from having any kind of user that is under 13. And so what I foresee is a lot of companies saying, "Oh, look, here. Oh, wait, you're under. No, sorry, we can't give you an account, or you've already created one, and we validated that your age is under our limit. Please come back in 3 years when you're over the limit. Whatever." And so that's going to be interesting. Um, the age verification study and report. The Secretary of Commerce, in coordination with the Federal Communications Commission and Federal Trade Commission, to conduct a study evaluating the more technologically feasible methods and options for developing systems to verify age at the device or operating system level. Like that's just wild. Like, you can't do that. There's no way to do that. You have to prove their identity, not their age. Because by proving their state issued identity, you can then validate their age, but not the other way around. What this is the back door to say, look, you need to validate your identity on every website. You need to be able to say that you really are who you say you are, and that your ID says so, and that you really are the owner of that ID. That's what this is. Anonymous free speech is being killed by this. And they want you to consider the benefits of creating a system that kills off anonymous free speech and what needed information is needed, which I've just talked about. And so the technical feasibility, it's not. Not unless you do a full identity verification, which nobody wants to do. And so this is badly written. This is just badly written. And they're trying to say that 18 months after this is enacted, the FTC in consultation will take all the data that they've been given from the above, from all the reports that companies have given them. Because remember, this is they want an 18 months after, which means they're looking for an entire year cycle to happen at least before that happens. So they're going to be given a lot of information and have around, at least 6 months to be able to look at that and go, oh, okay, here's what all the data that we've been given says. And so what they're really doing is they're saying this is our data collection method, and and then they can go back and start dictating design features that encourage or increase, and et cetera, et cetera. And so, and they're also talking about apparently they're going to shall issue guidance to assist elementary and secondary schools in using the notice, safeguards, and tools provided as accurate information, online safety for students and teachers, which is, I guess that makes sense. But the fun thing about this is that a violation of this act shall be treated as a violation of a rule defining an unfair or deceptive act or practice prescribed under Section 18A1B of the Federal Trade Commission Act. That's federal law. That's federal code. Like, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sure Legal Eagle is going to have an amazing video on this when he finally gets around to doing it. But he probably won't do that unless it passes. But the thing about this is that as a software development engineer, this means that you are going to be writing code in your job that you're going to be trying to make sure you follow federal law with. Okay. And this might be new for some of you because what's going to happen is if some of you aren't familiar with things like ITAR, for example, then this might be really new to you. But if you're familiar with ITAR because you work in cryptography like I have, there are specific things that legally speaking you are not allowed to do. And so this is going to be new to a lot of developers. And they're going to say basically, look, we're going to enforce this by making it the law that you do so. And if you fail, it's a federal, which is, 10 years in jail and $250,000 fine is basically what they're saying. Now, I don't know who would pay that. Would it be the developer who wrote the code? Would it be the C level at the company that said, do this? I don't know. More realistically, they'll probably just pay fines. I don't think anybody will go to jail over it unless they do something really bad. But that's something to think about. And if you're writing code, you are responsible for the code that you write. So when you say looks good to me on the pull request, it better be good. And state attorney generals are, basically being told make sure that you do the right thing, make sure you follow this. It's now federal, blah blah blah. And you can conduct your investigations and do all those things. And they're also going to create a new council, a safety council, full of people that will then, uh, you know, dictate things. And they're going to have people from the National Telecommunications Information Administration, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Justice, the Department of Health and Humane Services. Those people are going to come together as a community, create a new little group of super friends, and at that point, they're going to start iterating on all the data they've been given to figure out what else they can legislate. And basically, this basically says, look, these other laws are not changed. In fact, if anything, think about this as I think in technical terms, you can kind of consider this bill to be a standards update. It's like a new version of C++. All the stuff you used to know about C and C++ still apply, but now you've got some extra domain namespaces and maybe a few keywords have changed because they're easier to use or they're more strict. It's basically the same thing. And so my recommendation is read this whole thing in full, either way, just like you would a new standard of C++. And make sure you've read it at least once for your own guidance. And so the thing that I really wanted to get to here, and I know this is long, but this is important. Title 2, filter bubble transparency. Okay? Basically, they're making the algorithm illegal. Because like I said before, if somebody who's younger has the ability to opt out of it, Why wouldn't you give that to adults as well? Why would you treat them separately? If anything, if you don't do that, if you treat them separately, you're going to make adults try to tell you that they're younger than they are just to get access to those features. So here, algorithmic ranking system. The term algorithmic ranking system means a computational process, including one derived from algorithmic decision making, machine learning, statistical analysis, or other data processing, are artificial intelligence techniques used to determine the selection, order, relative prioritization, or relative prominence of content from a set of information that is provided to a user on an online platform, including the ranking of search results, provisioning of content recommendations, display of social media posts, or any other method of automated content selection. AKA, if it chooses what shows up on your feed, that's what the algorithm is. And that's how we all know it is, but they had to be really freaking anal about it because this is a law. So they're trying to be explicit. And they're being pedantic for a reason. Because tell you what, lawyers are very pedantic. A lot more pedantic than your compiler, I assure you. And so the fun thing about this is that if your geolocation information says this, the term approximate geolocation information means information that identifies the location of an individual within a precision of less than 5 miles. Basically, every cell phone has that because GPS is not perfect. It like if I had like my phone right now, it doesn't say, "Hey, Dwayne's in his chair 2.5 feet from the wall," blah blah blah, right? But the thing about GPS is it's got a, let's just say 34, 33 or so meter radius. And so 100 feet or so within 100 feet, which is about the distance between two telephone poles. That's the resolution that you get when you deal with GPS. Anything better than that is a guess. And yes, there are systems in place that actively guess. There's multiple layers of GPS is the best way I could put that. Is that you have the first one, which is uh, the 34 meters or so, and then you have additional triangulation that happens based on where you are, that actually gets it down so that it's within 34 feet or so. But the thing is that each of those layers are required, and modern devices do them. Older ones don't, and so basically every modern device falls within this. And so this is everything: your iPad, your iPhone, your Android, even the GPS available on your computer, your desktop computer, because of things like, oh, we know where you are from the billing address. Okay. So that's kind of interesting. Talking about the commission, Federal Trade Commission, connected devices, basically anything. If it can be connected to the internet, either indirectly or directly, it's a connected device. The term input transparent algorithm means an algorithm ranking system does not use the user data of a user to determine the selection. Basically, I'm going to speed through all this because this is getting long. But basically, what they're doing is they're saying, look, if we're going to define algorithms as either opaque or transparent. Either they tell you up front how the data you've entered into them is used, or they don't. For example, if somebody's using an RNG, a random number generator, to figure out if you see a post or not, that is an opaque system. That is not something you can control. That is not something that you can be opted out of. Therefore, that is opaque, and we don't like it. Okay, and there is some interesting stuff here in that they've basically said, look, we've already defined age, we've already defined location, we've already defined language. But anything outside of that, it's, kind of a big deal if you do that. And so For purposes of subparagraph A, user data is provided by user. The express purpose is determining the selection, blah blah blah, of privatization of information is furnished to users on a platform to include user supplied search terms, filters, speech patterns. Basically, what they're trying to say here is that it's okay to use some generalized geolocation information, but if it's too specific, that can be a problem. And if you're doing input to an algorithm, it should be something that the users actually explicitly consented to. And it should be something that they can change and opt out of. And so this is going to be very interesting for the algorithm of sites like Twitter, which are public and open source. And because of that, we know how terrible they are. And we know that they are absolutely doing things that this says that they should not be doing. And so the sites that don't make it public and accessible that way are going to have an even harder time because filtering things and displaying them based on the chronological date and saying, hey, this just happened 5 minutes ago is what a lot of people want. But the so called algorithm that says you might want that, well, maybe the algorithm's wrong and you're going to have the ability to call that out now. And if you don't, well, if they don't, they're going to get in trouble. Because if you're underage and you want to opt out and they don't let you, well, it looks like it might be illegal. So, requirement to allow users to see unmanipulated content on internet platforms. Beginning on the date that is 1 year from the date of enactment of this act, it shall be unlawful for any person to operate an online platform that uses an opaque algorithm unless the person complies with the requirements of subsection B. Okay, that's why we went and we defined opaque versus transparent because that's important. Because what they've done is they've made opaque algorithms illegal. In general, the requirements of subsections with respect to the person who operates an online platform that uses an opaque algorithm are the person provides notice to users of the platform that the platform uses an opaque algorithm that uses user-specific data to select the content the user sees. This notice shall be presented in a clear and conspicuous manner on the platform whenever the user interacts with an opaque algorithm for the first time, and may be a one-time notice and can be dismissed by the user. And in terms of the conditional online platform, in a clear, accessible, and easily comprehensible manner. It has to be updated whenever the online platform makes a material change to the most salient features, inputs, and parameters used by the algorithm. So every single time they update the code, every time you do a code push, it says, oh, we need to add a new parameter, or we need to change the parameter, or how it's used, or we need to remove a parameter. You got to tell the user. And if you don't, well, guess what? You messed up. And so that's interesting. Any option that the online platform makes unavailable for a user of the platform to opt out or exercise options under. Wow. So yeah, I mean, if you allow one user to opt out, you're going to allow them all. You're going to have feature flags per user. That's the thing. That's like I read this and I go, okay, well, you now have to worry about feature flags per user, not per deployment, per user. The online platform should enable users to easily switch between the opaque input transparent algorithm in their use of a platform. Oh yeah, that's uh, okay. Oh, and fun prohibition on differential pricing. An online platform may not deny, charge different prices or rates for, or condition the provision of a service or product to a user based on the user's election to use an input transparent algorithm in their use of the platform as provided under blah, blah, blah. And so they're also making it illegal to say, look, you chose to use the transparent version of the algorithm. So because of that, we're going to dock you and charge you more money. That's illegal. You can't do that. That's what this says, if I'm understanding it correctly. And they're saying it's an unfair, deceptive act to do so. And, blah, blah, blah. Relation to state laws, it preempts them because it's federal, right? So we're done. But here's the deal. We're at the hour mark, nice and clean. And that's a lot. Okay. And so my big takeaways from this are your systems should be transparent to the user. You should not be in a situation where you're not showing content to the user because of some custom thing, unless the user has opted into it explicitly and you tell them how that works. AKA, return by date, order by most recent is going to be the standard. And if there's too many items to do that with, that's when the fun starts. Feature flags are going to be per user because guess what? If you allow somebody who's under 17 to opt out of something and they have a better experience than an adult does, guess what? From the design perspective, you failed, which means everybody should be allowed to opt out of those things. Okay. What this does is it doesn't just change stuff for minors, it changes it for adults as well because it mandates the differences in UI and design. And so this is something that if it passes, and I'll make a video if it does, will completely destroy some websites and it will completely destroy some use cases. But I think it might actually kick up hiring too, because you're going to need to rewrite that code. So it might be good for us. But it also means that if it passes, a lot of the things that will have to happen because of that, the new requirements, the new specs, the new designs, that will be a greater cost for the company. They're going to have to hire more, but they're also going to have to be able to say, look, how are we going to make money if we're spending all this money on people? Well, guess what? That may not be an option anymore. Either they go out of business or they hire the people. Because if they are found to violate the 10-day rule, let's face it, every single big company out there has more than 10 million users, they will have violated the act. Okay. And that is why this is important for software development engineers. Okay. How we do our code is fundamentally going to have to change. How we do our system design and our architecture is going to have to fundamentally change in many cases. Now, it's interesting in that a lot of systems, because they're built for people that are over 18, won't have to change at all. But if you're working on a children's platform or you're working in children's education, and I have, which is why I'm reading this, because I want to know what my obligations are, it's going to fundamentally change a lot about that system, and it's going to bring in new dependencies. I highly recommend that you read this full text. I will provide a link in the description and make a comment. I know this is a long video, but I hope it was worth it.